During the World War II, the world's attention was mostly fixed on the mighty battleships, the swift battlecruisers, and the powerful fleet carriers that dominated headlines and history books. Yet behind the scenes, another class of ships played a crucial role, often overlooked role. This is the escort carriers. Smaller, slower, and far less glamorous. These vessels provided vital air covers for convoys, supported amphibious assaults, and proved indispensable in anti-submarine warfare. Today, we at The Buzz turn the spotlight on these unsung heroes of the seas as we look at the 10 biggest escort carriers of World War II, the humble giants that quietly helped win the war. Number 10. The Bogue-class. The U.S. Bogue-class escort carriers, displacing about 14,200 tons full load and measuring 495 feet or 151 meters in length, were among the most important convoy escorts of the Atlantic. Commissioned from 1942 onwards, they served both in the U.S. Navy and under Royal Navy Lend-Lease. Their role was to carry 19 to 24 aircraft for anti-submarine warfare, convoy escort, and limited strike missions. They were armed with 2 5-inch guns and dozens of 40mm and 20mm AA guns, giving them formidable defensive firepower. Their heavy tonnage came from the sturdy C3 merchant hulls on which they were built. Many saw extensive action against U-boats, sinking over a dozen submarines. The Nairana-class escort carriers, displacing about 14,280 tons full load, were built in the United Kingdom and entered service in 1943. They were a class of 3 escort carriers built for the Royal Navy. They were about 161 meters, or 528 feet long, and carried up to 20 aircraft, supporting convoys in the Arctic and the Atlantic. Their role was largely anti-submarine patrol and convoy escort, crucial for guarding Murmansk runs against U-boats and Luftwaffe bombers. Armed with 2 4-inch guns, 6x40mm, and 20mm AA guns, they were well suited for defensive roles. Their heaviness came from being purpose-built with strong British steel hulls instead of conversions. At number 8, the Attacker class. There were a class of escort aircraft carriers in service with the British Royal Navy during the Second World War. They displaced about 14,630 tons full load and measured roughly 496 feet or 151 meters in length. Entering service from 1942, they operated mainly in the Atlantic and Mediterranean, supporting amphibious landings and convoys. They can carry about 20 aircraft, ranging from Marlit fighters to swordfish torpedo bombers. Their armament was centered on 2x4-inch dual-purpose guns with multiple 40mm buffers and 20mm Oerlikons for anti-air defense. What made them heavy was their robust C3 hull origins and the added weight of flight deck and hangars. The 7th biggest escort carriers of World War II is the USS Charger CVE-30. This was a U.S. Navy escort carrier, displacing about 15,368 tons full load with a length of 492 feet or 150 meters. Commissioned in March 1942, she served primarily as a training carrier, preparing thousands of naval aviators and crews for carrier operations. Unlike other CVEs, her role was not combat escort, but providing essential operational readiness. She carried around more than 30 aircraft and was armed with 2x5-inch guns and a suite of 40mm and 20mm AA guns for protection. Her heaviness came from being built on a solid C3 hull, with added flight structures and defensive weapons. Number 6. The Special 2L type. Japan's Special 2L type escort carriers displaced about 16,119 tons full load and were tanker-to-carrier conversions intended to reinforce naval aviation late in the war. About 157.5 meters long, they entered service in 1945 with small air wings of around 8 planes. Their mission was primarily convoy escort and pilot training, though Japan's fuel shortages limited effectiveness. Armed with 25mm AA weapons, they were heavily defensive. They were heavy due to being based on massive tanker hulls, designed for fuel capacity and structural strength. Despite displacement, they lacked speed and armor of fleet carriers. Number 5. The Kaio. The Japanese Kaio, displacing 16,483 tons full load and measuring 546 feet or 166 meters in length, was a converted passenger liner completed as an escort carrier in 1943. Her role was mainly aircrew training, aircraft ferrying, and coastal defense rather than frontline carrier battle operations. She carried about 24 aircraft, usually a mix of fighters and attack planes. Her armament included 2x127mm dual-purpose guns and 25mm AA batteries. Kaio was considered heavy because of her liner origins, given her a robust hull and larger displacement than most CVEs. She was damaged several times by U.S. submarines and air raids. Surviving the war, she was scrapped in 1946 after being heavily battered in 1945 bombings. Number 4. The Taiyo-class. The Japanese Taiyo-class escort carriers displaced around 20,321 tons full load and measured 591 feet or 180 meters in length. Converted from large passenger liners, commissioned from 1941 onwards, they included Taiyo, Unyo, and Chuyo. Their role was largely aircraft transport, training, and convoy escort, filling Japan's shortage of fleet carriers after early losses. They carried around 30 aircraft and were armed with 4x127mm dual-purpose guns and numerous 25mm AA weapons. Their displacement stemmed from their ocean liner origins, which gave them spacious hangars and long endurance. However, their speed was limited and defenses weak compared to fleet carriers. All three were eventually sunk by U.S. submarines between 1943 and 1944. At number 3, the Shino. The Japanese Shino, displacing 20,586 tons full load, was converted from the German ocean liner Scharnhorst, seized by Japan. Measuring 621 feet or 189 meters in length, she was commissioned in November 1943. Her role was convoy escort in the East China Sea, where she protected vital oil and supply routes. She carried about 33 aircraft and was armed with 8x127mm dual-purpose guns and a suite of 25mm AA guns. Her heavy weight came from her German liner origins, which made her larger and sturdier than most Japanese CVEs. However, like other Japanese escort carriers, her aircraft complement was small for her tonnage. On 17 November 1944, she was sunk by the U.S. submarine USS Spadefish with heavy loss of life. Number 2. The Commencement Bay class. The American Commencement Bay class escort carriers were the second largest escort carriers in World War II, displacing about 24,487 tons full load and stretching 557 feet or 170 meters in length. Commissioned from 1944 onward, they were purpose-built CVEs rather than conversions. They carried about 34 aircraft, usually a mix of fighters and torpedo bombers for amphibious support and convoy duty. Armed with 2x5-inch guns, an extensive 40mm and 20mm AA batteries, they were formidable defensive ships. Their heaviness came from being designed with larger hulls and more armored compared to earlier CVEs. They entered service late but played roles in the Pacific amphibious invasions of 1945. Many served into the post-war era before decommissioning in the late 1940s to 1950s. Number 1. The Sangamon-class. The American Sangamon-class escort carriers, displacing about 24,665 tons full load and 553 feet or 169 meters in length, were converted from Cimarron-class fleet oilers. Commissioned in 1942, they served in Pacific with distinction. They carried about 25 to 32 aircraft, providing close air support for amphibious landings and convoy escort. They carried aircraft like Grumman F-4F Wildcat and Grumman TBF Avenger, or Douglas SBD Dauntless. Their armament included 2x127mm caliber guns, 40mm buffers, and 20mm Oerlikons, making them well defended against air attack. Their heavy displacement came from being built on large oiler hulls, giving them endurance and fuel capacity unusual for CVEs. They were considered the toughest of all escort carriers, surviving heavy kamikaze attacks. Ships like USS Sangamon supported operations at Leyte and Okinawa. After the war, they were decommissioned by 1947 and later scrapped. With this, The Buzz is signing off for today, but stay tuned and we'll see you guys again in our next video. Until then, bye-bye.